Yes, I'm a maker and a writer and a sort of technologist. But today I'm going to talk about time capsules. I hate time capsules. I hate that they're just full of rubbish. They could be under your feet at any time when you're enjoying an otherwise nice walk. They're sort of, they're just full of like obsolete currency and newspapers that are completely irrelevant and sort of commemorative royal memorabilia and this kind of nonsense. And they're just kind of a way of dispersing landfill. The future of rubbish is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. But time capsules are just the beginning. I'm concerned that our short-term thinking is making us masters of a kind of memorial sentimentality on this huge scale. There was a madness in the air around the year 2000. Some of you might remember. It's the madness that kind of escalated over generations and decades, such that a date became an occasion. And very weird things started to happen in people's psychology. We have this timeline with this sort of memorial at the end of it that was this kind of milestone or landmark that we all felt we were building up to. And it had a weird effect on our perception of time and our sort of perception of the future, because it represented the future, but at the same time we couldn't really see past it. It's like the millennium, that was everything. So also the trouble with this is that it creates this kind of passivity amongst us. So we felt that we didn't have to do anything because we would just automatically be led up to this momentous occasion that was the millennium. And although this madness affected everyone to some extent, whether you're aware of it or not, I think, it was particularly potent among the young. It was a kind of cultural phenomenon where you had Will Smith and, for people who were into like the X-Files and these kind of young people things, music and design and modern architecture. And I was 21 in the year 2000. So for me, and my generation, it felt weirdly personal. It felt like it was just too much of a coincidence that the civilization was coming of age at the same time we were. Unlike all the other young people at every other point in history who felt special, we felt really special. We were different somehow. And when your personal timeline collides with this timeline of civilization in this way, these weird things start to happen. Having this kind of memorial that's already there on your kind of worldview all the time gives you a sense of importance too, and you become infected with the strangeness of this object that's both sort of in time and outside of time. It's kind of exists in an unreal plane where it's representing the future, and yet it's always been there ever since anyone could remember. The millennium is just this thing kind of hanging there. And it does a strange thing to you where you feel mysteriously strange and magical and important as well. And I think there's a real danger with this, because not only does it make you kind of passive and like a passenger in this kind of important world, you become sort of compelled to make your own special memorial graffiti. You become sort of inspired by this thing that's on this timeline, and you want to do the same thing. And it's become a huge problem. We've created so many, what I would call graffiti monuments in the honor of our wonderful millennium. So the Millennium Gallery is in Sheffield, where I live. At the time, I guess it felt really fresh and new. It was like, yeah, let's name it after the millennium. That's the coolest thing we can imagine. And then, like now, it's like, oh, so, a museum and a gallery that just kind of feels like it's 13 years old. That's all it says to me now. A Millennium Bridge in London, Millennium Bridge in Gateshead, slightly cooler, but has the same problem. And the Millennium Dome, least said, soon as mended. The two at the top there, Cardiff's an amazing place for millennium stuff. It's just like a millennium hotspot. You've got I've done quite a lot of research into this. You've got the Millennium Stadium and the Millennium Arts Centre there. We've got the Millennium Seed Bank at Kew, Millennium Way, which is a walkway on the Isle of Man, where I used to live, and then possibly the earliest sighting of a millennium, the Millennium Falcon from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So I think it's quite interesting that nothing is named after the millennium anymore. like, you just take it for granted that it was a thing that you did around the year 2000, but now no one's actually that interested in it anymore. And the reason I think this is because we've kind of created a prospective heritage. We've created things that seem, because they seem important to us in the present, we therefore project that they'll be important to people in the future. And what we're doing is kind of creating these imaginary future people that we sort of project our own significance into. And it's dangerous and sort of slightly arrogant, really. It's like we can imagine what anyone in the future will think. And it's a sort of a snapshot. These things are like a little snapshot of our imagined future attitude to importance. So I don't think it's really possible to create things that we can definitely say are going to be interesting to people in the future. However, I do think there is something quite charming about our kind of year 2000 obsession with the millennium and our late 90s interest in all this, this kind of stuff. These kind of monuments are a little bit embarrassing for us to look at. They're a bit sort of like photos of us as teenagers. We don't really want to have to look back on them, but actually it's useful to, because we can learn from them. And also they have this kind of charming innocence and naivety about them, which is quite appealing. So I have had these two slides made up as postcards, and if you would like one, please don't all ask for the one with the Millennium Falcon in, because I'll be really disappointed that you're all stereotypical geeks. But come and ask. I have got a limited selection of Millennium-themed postcards to give away. So come and have a chat. Be good. So it's really important, I think, to remember that we're not actually the end of the line. We already exist in someone else's past. There is definitely going to be a future. The future heritage industry, which is making these kind of monuments, is kind of an industry of speculation. But actually, our sense of the future is always filtered by this part of us that already exists in someone else's past. You can't really separate past, present, and future quite so clearly. And a time capsule never has to acknowledge that. Cultural heritage cannot be speculated. It's actually just a one-way street. And we can't really be rational about the future. It's very difficult because the future is this kind of fantasy projection for us. It's like a blank piece of paper with nothing written on it. And the great thing about that is that it allows us to imagine that the future is somehow divorced from any kind of, it's a fantasy state. It doesn't have a tale of past attached to it in the way that we do, and we want to escape that by imagining that the future is completely divorced from time. But of course it isn't. It will have that burden. But while we imagine it's like that, it also creates a pressure for us because we want to write on this blank piece of paper. I posit that the solution to that is to imagine that to realize that we already are writing on it. We're already halfway into the future. This is a quote from a friend of mine who heard what I was talking about and said, I've got something relevant to your talk, which you might be interested in. I remember when I was 5 years old, everyone in the village gathered around to watch a tree being planted to mark some big occasion. Now most of those people are dead. No one will remember what the occasion was, and fuck knows where the tree is, if it even still exists. It's probably part of some overgrown hedge. At the time, everyone thought that the tree would be looked upon in awe by generations to come, and he likened it to a child actor who never became the superstar they'd hoped he would. So these things are kind of disingenuous. It's a little bit like a funeral. We create these things for the present rather than the people of the past or the future. However, when we're asked to consider the fact we already exist in someone else's past, the results can be rather beautiful. This is the 10,000-year clock, a machine designed to last for 10,000 years. It's being built in a mysterious hillside in the Texan countryside somewhere. And you do have to wind it occasionally. It won't actually run reliably for 10,000 years. But it is an amazing thing. And it doesn't say, let's speculate on how we are a bit like the future, in a way a lot of these Millennium Monuments do. It says, let's remember we're not actually the end of this line. We're just the beginning. And I think that's really important. This is Nick Pope. Obviously, it's not Nick Pope. Nick Pope is the real Fox Mulder, self-styled, actually. He worked for the Ministry of Defence in the 90s, and people used to sort of whistle the X-Files theme tune when he walked down the corridors, because he was in charge of unexplained phenomena and things, and these weird reports about UFOs and stuff. No one knows millennial madness like Nick, right? And he said, after the moon landings, we believe we'll be holidaying on the moon by the year 2000. The media deceives, and progress is often slower than we think. We romanticize the past, look forward to significant dates in the future, and dismiss the present. So we have this pressure of a blank page, and it is actually, I think, getting in the way of our humility. And our humility is the thing that makes us content with living in the present. I just think we should get over ourselves, really. I think this is our fundamental problem and sort of the theme of this talk. Sorry. And this is where we went wrong with the millennium and where we're still going wrong. As we move forward in time, we drag this sense of future back towards us, and it smothers the present. But we need to somehow try and recover our sense of presentness. The present can feel like the thing it's intolerable to look at directly. This is, the future is not something that's all flying cars and speculation and completely divorced from everything else. It's banal and it's already happening. The future is in-flight meals and interstellar travel. That's the interesting future, the one we should be focusing on. But we really need to think about the present. We need to accept that there's a world beyond our direct influence, that we can have knowledge of the future and of the past, because they're actually both traced on us already. But we need to use this knowledge to examine the present. That's where we can use it most interestingly, because that's where our uncertainty begins and ends. And it is, after all we have. Thank you very much.